Dawn breaks over the northern Cascades as an anguished cry echoes through the dense forest. 6 search and rescue dogs strain against their leads while their handlers struggle to follow a scent trail that seems to vanish into thin air. Former Marine Corps K-9 Commander Lucas Sullivan stands at the edge of a ravine, his weathered face grim as he studies the impossible scene before him. "There's something wrong with this search," he mutters, his breath visible in the cold morning air. The lead handler approaches, desperation in her eyes. "20 years I've been doing this, Sullivan. Never seen anything like it. These children can't have just disappeared." What began as a routine missing persons case in the remote wilderness of Washington state transformed into something far more sinister when America's most decorated K-9 veteran is called out of retirement. No one could have predicted that 3 missing children would lead to the discovery of an underground network operating in plain sight, or that a specialized team of search and rescue dogs would become the only hope of exposing a truth that powerful. People will kill to protect. This is the story of how 1 retired Marine, 6 civilian handlers, and their remarkable dogs uncovered a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of local government, and the lengths they'll go to bring the missing children home. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. If this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Lucas Sullivan stands on the porch of his modest cabin, watching the sun rise over the Cascade Mountains. At 58, his tall frame remains imposing, despite the slight stoop in his shoulders, a permanent reminder of injuries sustained during his final deployment. The morning light catches in his silver-streaked beard as he sips his coffee, dark and bitter, just as he's taken it since his first days in the Corps 3 decades ago. Below him, sprawled across the worn wooden steps, his 2 Belgian Malinois watch the tree line with alert eyes. Ranger and Scout aren't just pets, they're veterans too. The dogs served alongside Sullivan in Afghanistan, helping to uncover hidden explosive devices and track high-value targets across impossible terrain. Now retired, they remain as vigilant as ever, their muscular bodies tensing at every unfamiliar sound that carries from the surrounding forest. "Easy, boys," Sullivan murmurs, "just another day in paradise." The cabin sits on 20 acres of woodland, approximately 30 miles outside the small town of Pinecrest, Washington. Isolated by choice, it's the perfect place for a man who returned from war-seeking solitude rather than celebration. Few in Pinecrest know much about Sullivan beyond his reputation as the reclusive ex-Marine who occasionally helps the local wildlife rehabilitation center train rescue dogs. Fewer still know about his distinguished military career or the groundbreaking K-9 tracking program he developed that revolutionized how military working dogs are trained for combat environments. The program, known as Terrain Adaptable Tracking, TAI-T, transformed K-9 units from simple detection teams to elite tracking assets capable of following scent trails across varied and challenging landscapes. Sullivan's methods proved so effective that they've since been adopted by military units worldwide. What made his approach unique was his insistence that the bond between handler and dog mattered more than any technology or training protocol. "The dog isn't a tool," he would tell his Marines. "It's your partner. Trust it when everything else fails you." That philosophy saved countless lives on the battlefield and cost Sullivan everything when a mission went catastrophically wrong. The details remain classified, but the outcome is written in the scars visible on his hands and the nightmares that still wake him at 0300 hours. Sweating and reaching for a weapon that's no longer there, the ringing of his phone breaks the morning stillness. Sullivan checks the screen and frowns at the unfamiliar local number. He rarely receives calls these days, preferring the quiet company of his dogs and the predictable rhythms of his self-imposed isolation. "Sullivan," he answers curtly. "Commander Sullivan?" The voice on the other end is female, professional, but with an edge of urgency. This is Emily Reeves, Director of the Cascade, County Search and Rescue Unit. I'm sorry to disturb you, but we have a situation. Sullivan's posture straightens instinctively, muscle memory from years of command. I'm retired, Director, and I was never a commander. Marine Corps uses different terminology. I apologize, Master Sergeant, she corrects herself. But your name came up repeatedly when I asked about the best canine tracking expert in the region. We've got 3 children missing in the Cascade Wilderness, going on 36 hours now. Our dogs are hitting roadblocks I've never seen before. Sullivan's gaze shifts to Ranger and Scout, now sitting at attention, as if sensing the change in their handler's demeanor. Your team is well trained. Whatever problems you're having, I doubt I can offer anything they haven't tried. With respect. So that's not true, Reeves insists. Your work with scent discrimination in complex environments is unmatched, and our situation is unusual. Unusual how? Sullivan finds himself asking, despite his reluctance to get involved. The children, siblings aged 7, 9, and 12, were camping with their uncle in the northern part of the county. The uncle stepped away from their site to gather more firewood. Says he was gone less than 20 minutes. When he returned, all 3 were gone. No signs of struggle, no indication they wandered off. The dogs tracked their scent about half a mile into the forest, and then, she pauses, frustration evident in her voice, nothing. Like they vanished into thin air. Children don't vanish, Sullivan states flatly, and scent doesn't just disappear. That's exactly why I'm calling you, Reeves responds. We've got the best SAR team in the state, and they're baffled. The lead. Handler mentioned your work on tracking subjects through water and underground spaces. Said if anyone could figure this out, it would be you. Sullivan closes his eyes, weighing the request against his vow to leave that life behind. 3 children. Lost in the wilderness shifts the equation considerably. What's your current operational status? We've got 6 handler K9 teams on site, plus 20 ground searchers and a helicopter on standby. Local authorities are coordinating, but the search area is expanding with every hour that passes. And the weather forecast, that's our other problem. Major storm system moving in within the next 48 hours. If we don't find these kids before it hits, the unspoken conclusion hangs between them. Children lost in the Cascade Wilderness when a storm hits face survival odds that diminish by the hour. Sullivan takes a deep breath. Send me the coordinates and everything you have on the children, clothing descriptions, personal items that might carry their scent, family dynamics, any medical conditions. I'll be there in 2 hours. Thank you, Master Sergeant. I'll have everything ready. As the call ends, Sullivan looks down at Ranger and Scout. So much for retirement, boys. Inside the cabin, Sullivan moves with practiced efficiency, packing specialized equipment rarely seen outside military operations. His go bag, never fully unpacked even after years of civilian life, contains tactical gear, advanced navigation, equipment, and specialized K9 handling tools developed during his years leading Marine Corps tracking teams. He adds a weatherproof case containing topographical maps of the Cascade region, studied and memorized during long evenings when sleep proved elusive. As he prepares, Sullivan's mind shifts into operational mode, a mental state he hasn't accessed since leaving the service. The process is like slipping into an old uniform, familiar but no longer a perfect fit. He pushes away the memories threatening to surface, focusing instead on the mission parameters. 3 missing children, 36 hours elapsed. Limited time before weather compromises the search area. Ranger and Scout watch his preparations, their bodies tense with anticipation. They recognize the signs of deployment even years removed from active duty. Sullivan pauses to study them. The dogs are older now, 9 years to his human 58, but still capable. Their specialized training represents thousands of hours of development, refinement, and practical application in some of the world's most challenging environments. "You up for one more mission?" he asks them quietly. Both dogs stand at attention, as if understanding the question perfectly. Sullivan makes one final call before departing to Dr. Ana Martinez at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, where he occasionally volunteers. She answers on the second ring. The great hermit Sullivan calls instead of texts. "Must be serious," she teases, familiar enough with his reclusiveness to joke about it. "Need a favor, Anna? I'll be away for a few days. Search and rescue operation." There's a momentary pause as she processes this unexpected development. In the 3 years she's known him, Sullivan has never mentioned any involvement with search and rescue. "You're joining a SAR team? Since when do you work with people?" "It's a special circumstance," he explains briefly about the missing children and the unusual tracking problems. "I'm taking Ranger and Scout. Could be nothing, but if it goes longer than expected..." "I'll check on the cabin," she promises, her tone shifting from surprise to support. "Do what you need to do, Lucas." The use of his first name, rare in his carefully maintained world of last names and titles, reminds him of the fragile connection to humanity he's allowed himself in recent years. Anna is perhaps the closest thing to a friend he has in Pinecrest, though their relationship remains firmly professional. As the center's veterinarian, she's helped care for Ranger and Scout during their transition to retirement, and in return, Sullivan has helped train some of their rescue dogs for rehabilitation and eventual adoption. "Appreciate it," he says simply. 90 minutes later, Sullivan's truck winds along remote forest roads, approaching the command post established near the children's last known location. Ranger and Scout sit alertly in their specialized compartment behind the driver's seat, occasionally sniffing the air through partially open windows as the elevation increases and the forest grows denser. The command post comes into view, a collection of vehicles, temporary shelters, and communications equipment established in a small clearing. Search teams in high-visibility vests move with purpose between stations, while uniformed officers consult maps spread across the hood of a police SUV. Sullivan notes the organized chaos with a professional eye, assessing the operational efficiency of the response. As he parks, a woman approaches. Athletic build, mid-40s, with the weathered complexion of someone who spends significant time outdoors. She wears standard SAR gear with a red vest identifying her as team leader. "Master Sergeant Sullivan." She extends her hand. "Emily Reeves, thank you for coming." Sullivan shakes her hand briefly. "Just Sullivan is fine. Bring me up to speed." If she's put off by his brusque manner, Reeves doesn't show it. She leads him toward a map station, summarizing the situation as they walk. Mitchell family, Jason age 12, Emma age 9, and Tyler age 7. Their uncle Travis Mitchell brought them camping as part of a weekend trip. Site is approximately 3 miles north of this position. According to the uncle, he left them at the campsite around 1600 hours on Saturday to gather more firewood. When he returned approximately 20 minutes later, all 3 children were gone. "No signs of struggle?" Sullivan asks, studying the topographical map of the search area. "None that our team could identify. The campsite was undisturbed, food still laid out, personal items in place. The only thing missing were the children themselves." "And your dogs picked up their scent?" Reeves nods. "Initial tracking was strong. The trail led north from the campsite along what appeared to be a game trail, continued for approximately half a mile, and then," she gestures with her hands, "nothing. All 6 of our K9 teams hit the same spot and lost the scent simultaneously. It's like the children walked to that point and disappeared." Sullivan's eyes narrow. "No dog loses a scent that fresh without reason. Show me exactly where this happened." Reeves leads Sullivan to where her team has gathered near the edge of the command area. 6 handlers stand with their search and rescue dogs, a mix of breeds selected for their tracking abilities, including German Shepherds, a bloodhound, and several Labrador retrievers. Sullivan notes their professional equipment and the focused demeanor of both handlers and animals. This isn't an amateur operation. A tall, bearded man steps forward. "Mike Donovan, K9 team lead," he introduces himself. "Have to say it's an honor to meet you, Master Sergeant. Your work with the Terrain Adaptable Tracking Program is legendary in our field." Sullivan acknowledges the comment with a slight nod. "Tell me exactly what happened when your dogs lost the scent." Donovan gestures. "To a female handler with a bloodhound. Jessie's dog Copper has the best nose on the team. She should explain." The handler steps forward, her bloodhound watching Sullivan's dogs with professional interest. "We were tracking Strong along the game trail. The children's scent was clear. We had scent articles from their sleeping bags. About half a mile in, Copper suddenly stopped and began acting disoriented, started circling and whining, which isn't like him at all." She strokes the dog's head as she speaks. "I've worked with him for 6 years, and I've never seen him lose a scent like that." "Interesting," he murmurs, making adjustments. "And the other dogs had the same reaction?" Sullivan asks, looking at the remaining handlers. They all nod in confirmation. A handler with a German Shepherd adds, "It was eerie. All the dogs hit the same invisible wall. They tried to push forward, then back up, circling, obviously confused. We've worked recoveries in floods, after forest fires, in every condition imaginable, and I've never seen anything like it." Sullivan turns to Reeves. "I need to see this location immediately, and I need to know more about these children and their uncle. Has he been cooperative with the investigation?" Travis Mitchell has been interviewed multiple times by the sheriff's department, Reeves confirms. "He's distraught, as you'd expect. The children's parents are overseas, military deployment. He's their guardian while the parents are away." "Military family?" Sullivan's interest sharpens. "Which branch?" "Army. Both parents are career military. Father is a colonel, mother a major, currently stationed in Germany." Sullivan absorbs this information, filing it away as potentially relevant. "I'll need to speak with the uncle myself, and I want to see the campsite before we track to the location where your dogs lost the scent." Reeves nods. "I've arranged for Donovan to take you to both locations. The uncle is resting at a support tent, but I can have him ready to speak with you when you return." "One more thing," Sullivan adds, his tone indicating this point is non-negotiable. "My dogs work independently. Your teams stay back while we investigate." Donovan looks like he might object, but Reeves places a hand on his arm. "Whatever you need, Sullivan. We're all just trying to find these kids." 20 minutes later, Sullivan stands in the Mitchell family campsite with Ranger and Scout, both dogs now in working harnesses. The site remains largely as it was found. 3 sleeping bags arranged around a fire pit, cooking equipment, backpacks, and personal items secured in the family's tent. Yellow evidence markers placed by law enforcement dot various locations. Sullivan moves methodically through the space, allowing his dogs to investigate while he catalogues details that might escape others. The positioning of the sleeping bags tells him the children likely slept with the youngest in the middle, a protective arrangement. Food preparations suggest an organized meal plan rather than haphazard camping snacks. The uncle's sleeping position, slightly separated from the children, offers appropriate supervision distance. Nothing in the campsite suggests anything but a well-planned family outing. He removes 3 items from an evidence bag provided by the search team, articles of clothing belonging to each child, carefully preserved to maintain scent integrity. Sullivan presents each item to Ranger and Scout, using specific commands that differ from standard SAR protocols. "Detail scent," he instructs, rather than the typical find command. The specialized instruction activates different training pathways, directing the dogs to catalog multiple scent layers rather than simply following the strongest trace. The dogs work systematically, moving from the children's sleeping area in expanding circles. Sullivan watches their behavior with an expert's eye, noting subtle changes in posture and attention. When both dogs independently alert to the same path leading from the campsite, he knows they've acquired the trail. "Show me where your dogs lost the scent," he instructs Donovan, who has observed respectfully from the perimeter. Donovan leads them along the game trail, hiking approximately half a mile through increasingly dense forest. The terrain gradually slopes downward toward what appears to be a seasonal creek bed, now mostly dry except for a trickle of water running through its center. Large rock formations rise on either side, creating a natural funnel through the landscape. "Right here," Donovan indicates, stopping at the edge of the creek bed. All 6 dogs reached this exact spot and couldn't go further. Sullivan studies the location carefully. The physical environment offers no obvious explanation for the scent disappearance. The creek contains minimal water, not enough to wash away tracks or significantly disperse scent particles. The rocky terrain might hold scent differently than the forest floor, but experienced search dogs should easily compensate for the change. "Your dogs were working the air scent or ground tracking?" Sullivan asks. "Both. We tried every approach: air scenting, tracking, trailing. Different dogs have different strengths. None of them could push past this point." Sullivan removes his pack and extracts specialized equipment not typically seen in civilian search operations. He assembles what appears to be a handheld sensor with digital readout. "Atmospheric particulate analyzer," he explains, noting Donovan's curious expression. "Military prototype for detecting chemical and biological agents. Also happens to be useful for analyzing environmental factors that might affect scent dispersion." He activates the device, moving it in a methodical pattern across the area. The readings show nothing immediately unusual in the air composition, but Sullivan notes a subtle anomaly when he directs the sensor toward the creek bed, to the device. "What is it?" Donovan asks. Sullivan doesn't answer immediately, instead turning his attention to his dogs. "Ranger, Scout, Detail Scent," he commands, presenting the children's articles again. Both dogs immediately pick up the trail, following it to precisely the point where the SAR team's dogs had stopped. But unlike the previous K9 units, Ranger and Scout don't display confusion or disorientation. Instead, they exhibit a different behavior entirely, a specialized alert posture Sullivan recognizes from their military training. "Subterranean," Sullivan says quietly, recognizing the signal. Donovan looks puzzled. "What does that mean?" "It means your dogs didn't lose the scent," Sullivan explains, his expression grim. "The scent went underground." He kneels beside the creek bed, examining the rocky surface with experienced hands. The atmospheric readings, combined with his dog's specialized alert, suggest something that wouldn't be obvious to standard search procedures. "Help me move these rocks," Sullivan directs, pointing to an arrangement of stones that, to the untrained eye, appears natural. Donovan assists, and together they shift several large rocks to reveal what lies beneath. The narrow opening of what appears to be a crawl space or tunnel, partially concealed by natural rock formations and deliberately camouflaged with additional stones. "My God," Donovan breathes. "Is that man-made?" Sullivan studies the opening. Modified natural formation. Someone expanded an existing fissure. He shines a tactical flashlight into the darkness, revealing a passage sloping downward beneath the creek bed. "The children went in there? Voluntarily?" Donovan asks, disbelief evident in his voice. "That's what we need to find out." Sullivan straightens, his decision made. "Get Director Reeves on the radio. Tell her we found why the dogs lost the scent, and I'm going to need specialized equipment for confined space operations." He pauses, considering the implications of what they've discovered. And tell her to make sure the uncle stays at the command post. I have questions for him. As Donovan calls in their discovery, Sullivan kneels beside Ranger and Scout, scratching behind their ears in recognition of their work. "Good boys," he murmurs. What began as a missing persons case has just become something far more complex. Children don't simply vanish in the wilderness, and they don't typically enter hidden underground passages without reason. The carefully concealed entrance suggests planning and purpose, raising disturbing questions about what might lie beneath the peaceful forest floor. Sullivan stares into the dark passage, his military instincts on high alert. Whatever awaits in that underground space, he's increasingly certain it's connected to something much larger than 3 children who wandered away from their campsite. The real question is whether they were running from something or being led toward it. Either way, the clock is ticking, the storm approaches, and the answers lie in the darkness below. Within an hour, the discovery transforms the search operation. Equipment arrives from the Cascade County Emergency Response Unit, rappelling gear, confined space equipment, and communication devices designed to function underground. Sullivan assembles what he needs with practiced hands while director. Reeves coordinates with local authorities. Sheriff's Department is sending their tactical team, she informs Sullivan as he checks Ranger and Scout's specialized harnesses. Should be here within the hour. Sullivan shakes his head. We're not waiting. Those children have been missing for almost 40 hours in potentially dangerous conditions. Every minute counts. You can't go down there alone, Reeves protests. Protocol requires... I'm not alone, Sullivan interrupts, nodding toward his dogs. And I don't operate under your protocols. Donovan steps forward, his expression resolute. I'm coming with you. My dog Axel is confined space certified. We've done cave rescues before. Sullivan studies the man briefly, weighing the offer. Having backup would be tactically sound, especially someone familiar with the local terrain. How quickly can you be ready? 10 minutes, Donovan responds. Just need to get Axel's equipment. Sullivan nods his approval. 10 minutes, not a second more. While Donovan prepares, Sullivan approaches the command vehicle where Travis Mitchell, uncle of the missing children, waits as requested. The man appears exhausted, unshaven, eyes bloodshot from what might be lack of sleep or excessive tears, hands fidgeting nervously with the zipper of his jacket. Mr. Mitchell, Sullivan begins without introduction. I need to know everything about your camping trip. Every detail, no matter how insignificant it might seem. Mitchell looks up, momentarily confused by this unfamiliar, authoritative figure. I've already told the sheriff everything. Tell me, Sullivan insists, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mitchell sighs, running a hand through disheveled hair. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip. My brother and his wife are stationed overseas. I've been looking after the kids for the past 6 months. They've been having a hard time with the separation, so I thought some outdoor time might help. Why this specific location? Sullivan asks, watching the man's micro-expressions carefully. It's a spot we used to camp when we were kids, Mitchell explains. Not too remote, but far enough to feel like an adventure. The Rangers know it well. And you left 3 children alone to gather firewood? A flash of defensiveness crosses Mitchell's features. It was barely 20 minutes. The campsite was secure. Jason is 12, old enough to watch his siblings for a short time. I was within shouting distance. Did you hear anything unusual while you were gone? See anyone in the area? Mitchell shakes his head. Nothing. It was completely quiet. That's what makes this so crazy. When I got back, they were just gone. No sounds, no signs of struggle. Like they vanished. Sullivan's eyes narrow slightly. Did the children bring personal items with them? Backpacks, favorite toys, anything missing from the campsite? Mitchell pauses, considering for the first time. I don't know. I didn't think to check. I was focused on finding them. Think now, Sullivan presses. Was anything missing that should have been there? The uncle closes his eyes, visualizing the scene. Maybe Jason's backpack. I don't remember seeing it when I returned. He keeps a small survival kit in it, something his dad put together for him. Compass, emergency blanket, that sort of thing. Sullivan files this information away. A missing backpack suggests some level of preparation or intent. Did any of the children mention seeing anyone unusual near your campsite? Or talk about exploring any caves or tunnels in the area? No, nothing like that, Mitchell responds, then hesitates. Although, Emma did ask about some old stories. What stories? Local legends. My brother and I used to scare each other with them when we were kids. Stories about old mining tunnels and hidden spaces under the mountains. Emma's big on folklore and mystery books. She asked if I knew any spooky stories about the area. And did you tell her these stories about tunnels? Sullivan's intensity increases. Well, yeah, Mitchell admits, but they're just campfire tales. There aren't actually... He stops mid-sentence as understanding dawns. Wait, you found something, didn't you? Some kind of tunnel. Sullivan ignores the question. One more thing, your brother and his wife. What exactly do they do in the military? My brother's in Army intelligence. His wife works in communications. Why is that relevant? Probably isn't, Sullivan replies, though his expression suggests otherwise. Stay available. I'll have more questions later. As Sullivan turns to leave, Mitchell catches his arm. You're going after them, aren't you? Let me come with you. They're my family. Sullivan carefully removes the man's hand. Stay here. Let us do our job. He returns to the tunnel entrance, where Donovan waits with his German shepherd, Axel. Both are equipped for confined space operations, with specialized lighting, communication equipment, and protective gear. Find anything useful from the uncle? Donovan asks as Sullivan approaches. Possibly. The oldest boy might have had a backpack with him, suggesting this wasn't entirely spontaneous. Sullivan secures his tactical vest, checking equipment attachments. And there may be old mining tunnels in the area, part of local folklore. Mining tunnels? Donovan looks surprised. These mountains have a history of small prospecting operations, but nothing official in this region. At least, nothing on any modern maps. Unofficial operations don't make it onto maps, Sullivan points out, and tunnels built for questionable purposes certainly don't. With final preparations complete, Sullivan briefs Reeves on their approach. We'll maintain radio contact as long as signal permits. If we lose communication, initiate standard underground search protocols, but wait for our signal before sending additional teams. Unknown, confined spaces with potential structural instability are high-risk environments. Reeves doesn't look happy about the plan, but recognizes the urgency of the situation. What's your exit strategy if you find the children? Depends on what's down there, Sullivan answers truthfully. Best case scenario, we locate them quickly and backtrack through this entrance. Worst case, we're dealing with an extensive tunnel system and will need to find alternate egress points. And if you find evidence of... Reeves hesitates. Foul play. Sullivan's expression hardens. Then we deal with that too. With final instructions given, Sullivan and Donovan prepare to enter the narrow opening. The passage appears just wide enough for an adult to navigate on hands and knees, uncomfortably tight, but manageable. For children, it would be less. Restrictive dogs first, Sullivan directs. Ranger, Scout, seek detail. The specialized command instructs the dogs to enter and assess the passage while maintaining heightened awareness of environmental threats. Ranger leads, followed by Scout, both dogs moving with confident purpose despite the unfamiliar surroundings. Sullivan follows immediately behind, with Donovan and Axel taking the rear position. The passage descends at approximately 20 degrees, snaking beneath the creek bed. Tactical lights illuminate rough-hewn walls, part natural formation, part human modification. The air grows noticeably cooler and damper as they progress deeper. This is recent work, Sullivan observes, noting tool marks on certain sections of the tunnel. Last few years, not historical mining. Who would build this? And why? Donovan wonders aloud, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Let's find out. After approximately 50 meters of claustrophobic crawling, the tunnel suddenly opens into a larger chamber. Sullivan scans the space with his tactical light, revealing a crossroads of sorts. The natural formation connecting with what appears to be a more deliberately constructed tunnel system. The larger passage is reinforced with modern support beams and shows signs of regular use. Boot prints in the dirt, a floor, remnants of energy bar wrappers, even a discarded water bottle. This isn't some forgotten prospector's tunnel, Donovan whispers unnecessarily. This is active. Sullivan silently agrees, examining the ground for signs of the children. Ranger and Scout work methodically, quartering the chamber and checking each branching tunnel before alerting to the rightmost passage. They went this way, Sullivan confirms, noting fresh scuff marks that could match children's shoes. Recently, within the last 2 days. The radio crackles with Reeves's voice, already beginning to break up from interference. Sullivan, what's your status? Do you copy? Copy. We've found an extensive tunnel system, appears to be actively maintained. Evidence suggests the children came this way. We're continuing on the trail. Be advised, Sheriff's tactical team has arrived. They're preparing to follow your position. Negative, Sullivan responds firmly. Hold position until we assess the situation. Too many people in an unknown tunnel system increases risk. Over. Whether Reeves acknowledges is unclear. The radio emits only static as they move deeper into the mountain. Sullivan checks his specialized GPS unit, designed to function with limited satellite connectivity. We're heading northeast, approximately 30 meters below surface level now, he informs Donovan, and descending further. The main tunnel continues for another 100 meters before opening into an even larger chamber. This one clearly man-made and containing concerning evidence of sophisticated operations. Portable LED work lights attached to the walls cast the space in harsh illumination. Metal shelving units line one wall, stocked with supplies, food, water, first aid equipment, and more ominously, communications gear. A folding table holds maps and paperwork. A portable generator sits silent in one corner. What the hell is this place? Donovan breathes, turning in a slow circle to take in the underground facility. Sullivan moves directly to the table, examining the maps, while the dogs continue to track the children's scent. The documents reveal what appears to be an extensive tunnel and coded designations. This is a waypoint, Sullivan concludes, recognizing the tactical layout from his military experience. Part of a larger network. For what purpose? Before Sullivan can respond, Scout alerts near the far side of the chamber, pawing at what appears to be a child's hair tie on the ground. Ranger confirms the find, both dogs indicating the scent trail continues through another tunnel branching from the main chamber. Sullivan pockets the hair tie and photographs the maps and documents with a small tactical camera before turning his attention back to the trail. Let's move. The children definitely came through here. Shouldn't we document this site more thoroughly? Donovan asks. This is clearly illegal activity of some kind. Our priority is the children, Sullivan reminds him. Everything else is secondary. They follow the dogs into the continuing tunnel, which slopes more steeply downward. The construction becomes increasingly sophisticated. Concrete flooring in sections, electrical conduit running along the ceiling, even rudimentary ventilation ports. Whoever built this system invested significant resources and engineering. Expertise. After another 10 minutes of progress, Ranger and Scout both halt, adopting an alert posture that Sullivan recognizes immediately. Hold, he commands, raising his fist in the universal signal to stop. Proximity alert. Donovan freezes, his hand automatically dropping to Axel's harness to quiet the dog. Someone's ahead? Sullivan nods once, switching off his primary light and activating a dimmer secondary illumination. He signals for Donovan to maintain position while he advances with Ranger, leaving Scout to guard their rear. The tunnel curves sharply ahead, opening into what sounds like another chamber. Sullivan can detect the subtle change in air movement and acoustics. More concerning, he hears voices, low murmurs that could be conversation, possibly from multiple individuals. Ranger silently advances in reconnoiter formation, exactly as trained during combat operations. Sullivan follows, maintaining tactical spacing and minimizing noise. At the tunnel bend, he carefully positions himself to observe the space beyond without exposing his position. What he sees confirms this is far more than a missing children case. The tunnel opens into a substantial underground complex, a converted mining operation repurposed for modern use. The immediate chamber houses sophisticated communications, equipment, computer workstations, and what appears to be satellite uplink technology. 3 men in dark tactical clothing monitor the equipment. They're armed, sidearms, and at least 1 submachine gun visible. More concerning is what Sullivan glimpses through a connecting passage, an adjacent chamber where several individuals appear to be processing and packaging materials into waterproof containers. The operation resembles a drug production facility, but something about the materials and handling protocols suggests something potentially more dangerous. Sullivan retreats silently to Donovan's position and conveys what he's observed through hand signals and whispered instructions, organized operation, armed personnel, possible contraband production. And the children? Donovan whispers back. No visual confirmation yet, but the dogs are still indicating their scent continues through the facility. Donovan looks alarmed. They're being held in there. We need to call for backup. No signal this deep, Sullivan reminds him. And tactical response in confined spaces like this requires specialized training. If those men are alerted to law enforcement presence, they could hurt the children or use them as leverage. So what's the play? Sullivan considers their options, factoring in the unknown number of armed personnel, the complex layout, and most importantly, the safety of 3 vulnerable children. We need more information. I'll advance for closer reconnaissance. You maintain this position as fallback and security. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, retreat to the surface and bring in tactical response. Before Donovan can object, Sullivan continues. Ranger and Scout are trained for covert operations. They can move through that facility without detection, if necessary, and if you're detected, Sullivan checks his sidearm, a compact 9mm carried under special permit from his military service days. Then I'll create an opportunity for you to get help. Donovan clearly wants to argue, but recognizes the tactical logic. With 3 children at risk and unknown hostile forces ahead, conventional approach options are limited. 15 minutes, he agrees reluctantly. Then I'm coming in after you. Sullivan nods once, then turns his attention to final preparations. He removes specialized equipment from his tactical vest, a compact thermal imaging device and sound amplification system, both military-grade and not typically available for civilian use. Scout guard, he commands, leaving the dog with Donovan. Ranger, shadow. The specialized instruction activates Ranger's stealth movement protocols, silent advancement with maximum environmental awareness. With practiced efficiency, Sullivan advances toward the facility, Ranger moving slightly ahead as his sensory extension. They navigate the curve once more, then pause at the periphery of the main communications chamber. The 3 armed men continue their work, unaware of the observers. Sullivan studies their equipment, noting components consistent with secure military-grade communication systems, not standard criminal enterprise technology. Their weapons are similarly professional, MP5 submachine guns and what appear to be modified Sig Sauer sidearms. Sullivan activates the sound amplification device, carefully tuning it to filter ambient noise while enhancing conversation. Schedule. Still holding? One man asks, adjusting something on a monitor. Far as I know. Another responds. Transport team arrives at 600. We clear out by 0700. What about the complications? The third man questions, his tone suggesting concern. A moment of silence follows before the apparent leader responds. Being handled, package secured, extraction protocols in place. The conversation continues with similarly coded language, but Sullivan has heard enough to understand the urgency of the situation. They're planning to move something or someone by morning. Given the context and the children's presence, he can make educated guesses about what package refers to. He signals Ranger to continue tracking, directing the dog to find a less monitored approach route. The Belgian Malinois performs exactly as trained, identifying a ventilation shaft running parallel to the main chamber that might provide access to other sections of the facility. The shaft is narrow, too tight for an adult, but potentially navigable for Ranger. Sullivan makes a quick decision, removing the dog's tactical harness to allow greater mobility. Find children, he commands softly, using specific hand signals to indicate search and report rather than engagement. Ranger immediately understands, slipping into the ventilation shaft with silent efficiency. While waiting for the dog's return, Sullivan continues surveillance, mapping the facility's layout and personnel positions. He counts at least 7 armed individuals across the visible sections, with evidence suggesting more in unseen areas. Their movements and coordination indicate professional training, possibly military or special operations background. After approximately 8 minutes, Ranger returns, providing the specialized alert sequence that confirms successful location of targets. Sullivan retrieves a small tactical notepad, quickly sketching a rough map of the facility. Ranger indicates positions through trained response sequences, allowing Sullivan to mark the children's location in relation to current hostile positions. What emerges is concerning. The children appear to be held in a secure room on the facility's lower level, guarded and separated from the main operational areas. Extraction without detection seems virtually impossible. A tactical response team with proper equipment might succeed, but the complex underground layout creates significant risks for a frontal assault. Sullivan retreats to Donovan's position, where Scout maintains silent guard. He quickly briefs the SAR handler on his findings, sketching the facility layout and explaining the complications. They're alive, he confirms first, knowing this is Donovan's primary concern. Contained in what appears to be a secure room on the lower level. Ranger couldn't get close enough to assess their condition, but the fact that they're being held in a dedicated space, rather than with the general operation, suggests they're being treated as high-value assets, not immediate threats. Why would they take children? Donovan asks, bewildered by the situation. This doesn't make sense. It might, Sullivan responds grimly. The uncle mentioned his brother works in Army intelligence, his wife in military communications. The children could be leverage. You think this is connected to their parents' work? It's a working theory. What matters now is that we're dealing with a professional operation with at least 7 armed personnel, sophisticated communications equipment, and what appears to be some kind of contraband production facility. The children are being held in a secure location, and based on overheard conversations, they plan to move them by 0600 tomorrow. Donovan checks his watch. That's less than 10 hours from now. We need to get back to the surface and bring in FBI or military response. Agreed, but standard tactical response will take time to mobilize, especially for underground operations. By the time they're ready, those children could be gone. So what's the alternative? Sullivan considers their options, weighing tactical realities against the urgency of the situation. We return to the surface, brief Reeves and law enforcement on what we've found. I'll contact some former colleagues who specialize in this type of operation. People who can move quickly and without bureaucratic delays. Special forces? Something like that. Sullivan doesn't elaborate further. Meanwhile, we'll need to establish surveillance at all possible exit points from this tunnel system. Based on the maps I saw, there are at least 3 additional access points in these mountains. They begin their retreat, moving efficiently back through the tunnel system toward the original entrance. As they pass through the waypoint chamber, Sullivan takes additional photos of the maps and documents, ensuring they have comprehensive intelligence to share with authorities. The ascent through the narrow entrance tunnel is more challenging than the descent, requiring careful navigation in the confined space. After nearly 30 minutes of difficult progress, they finally emerge into the forest, where twilight has begun to settle over the mountains. The command post has expanded significantly. In their absence, additional vehicles, equipment, and personnel now occupy the clearing. Sullivan notes the presence of Sheriff's tactical team members, identifiable by their distinctive gear and weapons. Director Reeves rushes forward as they emerge, relief evident on her face. "We lost radio contact over an hour ago. What did you find?" Sullivan pulls her aside, away from the general operation area. "We need to speak privately, immediately." Inside the command vehicle, Sullivan briefs Reeves and Sheriff Townsend, a stern-faced man in his 50s with the weathered appearance of someone who spent decades in law enforcement. Sullivan provides a comprehensive assessment of the underground facility, showing the photos he captured and sketching additional details from memory. "This isn't a simple criminal operation," he concludes. "The equipment, personnel, and security protocols suggest military training and significant resources, and based on what we observed, they're producing or processing something highly controlled, possibly chemical or biological in nature." Sheriff Townsend looks skeptical. "You're suggesting some kind of black ops facility? In my jurisdiction?" "I'm reporting what I observed," Sullivan responds evenly. "Professional personnel, military grade, equipment, specialized production facilities, and 3 children being held in secure containment. Whatever your jurisdiction normally handles, Sheriff, this falls outside of it." Reeves interjects before an argument can develop. "The priority is recovering those children safely. Sullivan, you mentioned they plan to move them by 0600. That gives us very little time to organize a proper response." "Standard tactical response isn't appropriate for this scenario," Sullivan states firmly. "Underground assault against an unknown number of armed operators in a complex tunnel system with 3 child hostages presents unacceptable risks." "Then what do you suggest?" Sheriff Townsend demands. "Those kids are in my jurisdiction, and I'm responsible for their safety." Sullivan studies the man, assessing his capabilities and limitations. After a moment, he makes a decision. "I need to make a call. When I'm done, I'll outline a recovery plan that maximizes our chances of getting those children out alive." "Who are you calling?" Reeves asks. "Former colleagues," Sullivan answers simply. "Specialists in hostage recovery from denied areas." He steps outside, moving away from the operational center before retrieving a satellite phone from his equipment. The device isn't standard civilian technology, but rather a secure communication system retained from his military service days. He dials a number from memory, one that few people outside certain government circles would recognize. After a series of security verifications, a woman's voice answers. Identification code: Echo Sierra 79er Lima. Priority Amber. A brief pause follows. "Verified. Go ahead, Master Sergeant Sullivan. I need a watchmaker team. Immediate deployment. Hostage recovery scenario in denied territory." 3 juvenile principals, multiple hostile operators with military characteristics, potential CBRN elements. Location. Sullivan provides precise coordinates. Underground facility, multiple access points. Planned principal movement at 600 hours local. Another pause, longer this time. Understood. Assets in your vicinity can respond within 3 hours. Maintain position and prepare for advanced team arrival. Transmitting authentication codes now. His satellite phone displays a series of alphanumeric codes. Verification for the incoming team that Sullivan is the legitimate contact. Acknowledged, Sullivan confirms. Will prepare local assets to support but not engage. Sullivan out. He returns to the command vehicle where Sheriff Townsend and Director Reeves wait expectantly. Help is coming, he informs them. Specialized, recovery team, experienced in exactly this type of operation. They'll be here within 3 hours. What agency? Townsend demands. FBI? Homeland? Does it matter? Sullivan counters. They're authorized, equipped, and trained for this specific scenario. What matters now is preparing to support their operation without compromising the children's safety. Reeves studies Sullivan with newfound respect and perhaps a touch of concern. You have this kind of authority? To call in specialized teams? Not authority, Sullivan corrects. Relationships from previous service. Before further questions can be asked, a commotion erupts outside. The command vehicle. Raised voices and the sound of a scuffle draw their attention. Sullivan moves first, hand instinctively dropping to his sidearm as he exits the vehicle. 2 sheriff's deputies are restraining Travis Mitchell, the children's uncle, who appears to be in a state of panic or rage. His face is flushed, his body straining against their hold. What's going on here? Sheriff Townsend demands, following Sullivan outside. Sir, we caught him attempting to access the tunnel entrance, one deputy reports. He became combative when confronted. Mitchell's eyes lock onto Sullivan. You found them, didn't you? You know where they are. His voice carries the edge of desperation. Tell me what's happening to my family. Sullivan approaches the man carefully, noting the unnatural dilation of his pupils and the perspiration beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. These aren't just signs of emotional distress. Mr. Mitchell, Sullivan begins calmly, I need you to take a deep breath and explain why you tried to enter that tunnel against explicit instructions. They're my responsibility, Mitchell shouts. Their parents trusted me to keep them safe. I need to find them. And we will, Sullivan assures him, maintaining a calculated distance. But I need to understand something first. When exactly did you receive the call? The question catches Mitchell off guard. His struggle against the deputies momentarily ceases. What call? The one that told you exactly where to take those children camping. The one that instructed you to leave them alone for 20 minutes. The one that's making you panic right now because you know the deadline is approaching. The color drains from Mitchell's face. For several heartbeats, the forest around them seems unnaturally silent, as if holding its breath. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally manages, but his voice lacks conviction. I think you do, Sullivan responds, stepping closer. And I think you're scared, not just for the children, but for yourself. Whatever they threatened you with, whatever they promised you, we can help. But only if you start telling the truth. Right now, Mitchell's composure crumbles entirely. His knees buckle, and the deputies have to adjust their grip to keep him upright. When he speaks again, his voice emerges as little more than a broken whisper. They have my wife. They said they'd kill her if I didn't cooperate. Said they needed the children as insurance just for a few days. That they wouldn't hurt them if everything went smoothly. Tears streamed down his face. I didn't have a choice. God help me, I didn't have a choice. Sullivan exchanges glances with Reeves and Townsend. The implications of this revelation spreading through the gathering like a shockwave. This isn't just about 3 missing children anymore. It's something far larger and more dangerous. A coordinated operation targeting a military intelligence family through multiple vectors. Get him secured, Sullivan instructs the deputies. Full security protocols, and find out everything he knows about who contacted him and what exactly. They told him to do. As Mitchell is led away, Sullivan turns back to Reeves and Townsend. This changes things. If they're targeting the entire family, including coercing the uncle through his wife, we're dealing with a sophisticated operation with multiple objectives. What kind of people are capable of something like this? Reeves asks, visibly shaken. By the escalating situation, Sullivan's expression darkens as he stares toward the mountains, where twilight shadows grow deeper by the minute. The kind we need specialists to handle. Behind him, Ranger and Scout stand alert, their training keeping them ready despite the long hours of demanding work. The wind shifts, carrying the promise of the approaching storm, and perhaps something else, as both dogs simultaneously turn their attention toward the deepening shadows of the forest. Something is coming. The question is whether it will arrive in time. Night settles over the mountains as the temperature drops rapidly, bringing a crystalline clarity to the air. The command post transforms under Sullivan's direction, shifting from search and rescue operation to secure tactical staging area. Sheriff's deputies establish a perimeter, while SAR team members are reassigned to surveillance positions, monitoring potential tunnel exit points identified from Sullivan's photographs of the underground maps. Inside the command vehicle, Sullivan briefs the assembled team leaders on what to expect when the specialized unit arrives. These people operate differently than conventional law enforcement or military units, he explains, his tone making it clear this isn't negotiable. They move fast, speak little, and expect immediate compliance with their instructions. Your job is to provide support and stay out of their way unless specifically directed otherwise. Sheriff Townsend doesn't bother hiding his displeasure. This is still my jurisdiction, Sullivan. I need to know exactly who's coming and what authority they're operating under. They'll provide necessary credentials upon arrival, Sullivan responds evenly. But understand this. Their operational parameters supersede local jurisdiction when it comes to national security threats, which is exactly what we're facing. Based on what? Your hunch that this is somehow connected to the children's parents? Sullivan fixes the sheriff with a stare that's made hardened Marines reconsider their choices. Based on an underground facility with military-grade communications equipment, armed personnel with tactical training, evidence of controlled materials production, and a coordinated operation involving multiple hostages across different locations. Unless you've got specialized units trained for subterranean hostage recovery from defended positions, I suggest you prepare to cooperate. Before the argument can escalate further, Director Reeves intervenes. What about the uncle? Has he provided any useful information? Sullivan's attention shifts. Some. The initial contact came through an encrypted message to his personal email 3 weeks ago. No identification, just instructions and threats accompanied by photos of his wife in captivity. He was told where and when to take the children camping, and exactly how long to leave them unattended. The message indicated it was a simple extraction and the children wouldn't be harmed. He believed that? Townsend scoffs. He believed they'd kill his wife if he didn't comply, Sullivan corrects. Fear makes people rationalize. He convinced himself it might be a ransom situation, something that would resolve once whatever payment or demand was met. Donovan, who has remained quiet through most of the briefing, finally speaks up. The uncle didn't notify authorities or the children's parents. That suggests the threats were credible and specific. Probably included warnings about what would happen if he contacted anyone, Sullivan nods in agreement. Classic isolation tactic. They've been monitoring him since initial contact, which means they likely have surveillance on this entire area. This realization sends a ripple of unease through the group. The implications are disturbing. Not only was the children's disappearance planned, but the enemy operation had sufficient resources to maintain ongoing surveillance of both the uncle and potentially the official search response. Should we be concerned about our communications being monitored? Reeves asks. Assume they are, Sullivan advises. Restrict radio traffic to essential operations only. Use coded references for sensitive information, and prepare for the possibility that they know we've discovered their facility. As if to punctuate his warning, Ranger suddenly alerts, moving to the vehicle door with focused intensity. Scout mirrors the behavior seconds later. Sullivan recognizes the pattern immediately. Not a threat detection, but recognition of familiar scents. They're here, he announces, moving toward the door. Outside, the forest appears empty and silent. No vehicles approach on the access road. No helicopter rotors disturb the night air. Yet Sullivan moves with purpose toward the darkened tree line. Confident in his dog's signals, from the shadows, 4 figures materialize with uncanny silence. They wear non-standard tactical gear. Dark clothing optimized for movement rather than protection, minimal equipment beyond essentials, and weapons that, while military-grade, lack any identifying markings. Their faces are partially concealed by specialized masks that leave only their eyes visible. The lead figure steps forward, clearly recognizing Sullivan. Master Sergeant. The voice is female, calm and professional. Authentication code. Sullivan provides the code sequence received. Earlier, operational status. Advanced team present. Main element arriving separately via alternative insertion. The woman glances toward the command post where Sheriff Townsend and others watch with visible unease. Local assets. Mixed capabilities. Sheriff's Department search and rescue personnel, limited tactical training, no subterranean operation experience. 2 K9 units with relevant capabilities. Sullivan indicates Ranger and Scout with a subtle gesture. The woman studies the dogs with evident recognition. Your training programs. I've read the files. She turns her attention back to Sullivan. Brief us. Inside a hastily established secure area, Sullivan provides the team with comprehensive details. The facility layout, personnel observed, equipment identified, and the children's suspected location. He presents the photos and hand-drawn maps, along with analysis of security measures and potential approaches. The 4-person team absorbs the information with practiced efficiency, asking pointed questions that reveal their extensive experience with similar operations. They speak in the clipped, precise language of professionals for whom unclear communication costs lives. 7 confirmed hostiles. Probability of additional personnel, 1 team member inquires. High, Sullivan confirms. Facility scale suggests at least double that number, possibly more if shifts are rotated. Children's condition? Unknown. Unable to establish visual confirmation. Dogs tracked scent to secure area on lower level. The team leader, identified only as Chalk 1, studies the map tunnel system with particular intensity. Multiple access points creates tactical options but complicates containment. Probability of secondary explosives or defensive measures assessed as high. Facility investment suggests proportional security protocols. Chalk 1 nods, having reached similar conclusions. Main element arrives in 60 minutes. Advanced surveillance and infiltration begins immediately. Your dogs, operational capabilities in current environment. Sullivan understands the question's implications. Full tactical capacity, both certified for advanced tracking, defensive engagement, and infiltration support. We'll utilize them for the approach phase. Specialized communications, she gestures, to the tactical equipment visible on Ranger and Scout's harnesses. Full suite, audio-visual feed, tactical command reception, environmental sensors. For the first time, a flicker of something like respect shows in the woman's eyes. Impressive. Upgrades since your service days, Master Sergeant. The planning continues for another 20 minutes, establishing protocols for the combined operation. When Sullivan finally emerges to brief the local authorities, he finds Sheriff Townsend pacing impatiently outside the secure area. "Well?" the sheriff demands. "Do we finally get to know what's happening in my jurisdiction?" Sullivan provides a simplified overview, carefully omitting operational details that could compromise security if intercepted. Specialized team is initiating preliminary surveillance. Main response unit arrives within the hour. Once they have eyes on the children and confirm the threat assessment, they'll develop the extraction plan. "And our role?" Reeves asks. "Maintain the security perimeter, continue monitoring known tunnel exit points, and prepare medical support for the children's extraction. Additionally, I need everything you can find on regional mining history, any records of tunnel systems or underground structures that might not appear on conventional maps." Reeves nods, immediately dispatching team members to gather the requested information. Sheriff Townsend seems less satisfied, but recognizes the practical necessity of cooperation. "What aren't you telling us, Sullivan?" he asks directly when Reeves moves away. "Who exactly are these people?" Sullivan studies the older man, weighing how much to reveal. "They're the people you call when conventional options aren't sufficient. Beyond that, it's better for everyone if you maintain plausible deniability." The sheriff's expression suggests he's not entirely comfortable with this answer, but understands its implications. "Just make sure those kids come out alive. That's all that matters." On this point, at least, they're in complete agreement. As the advanced team begins their covert approach to the underground facility, Sullivan prepares Ranger and Scout for their role in the operation. Both dogs receive specialized gear, lightweight camera systems mounted to their tactical harnesses, along with enhanced communications equipment that allows handlers to provide commands from a distance. These modifications are impressive. Chalk 1 observes as Sullivan completes the final adjustments. Military applications. Some, Sullivan acknowledges. Most were developed for specialized K9 units operating in disaster zones or contaminated environments where handler presence isn't possible. The core technology adapts military remote operating systems for K9 application. "You designed these, contributed to the development," Sullivan corrects. "After leaving active service, I consulted on several specialized K9 programs." The woman seems about to ask another question when her communication device signals an incoming transmission. "Main element has arrived. Commencing operation briefing." The main response team arrives as promised, not by road or conventional aircraft, but silently filtering through the forest in small groups of 2 and 3 operators. Within 20 minutes, 12 additional personnel have assembled at the staging area, bringing specialized equipment for subterranean operations. Like the advanced team, they wear non-standard gear without identifying markings or insignia. Their leader, a lean, sharp-featured man identified only as Javelin, conducts a rapid operational assessment with Chalk 1 before turning his attention to Sullivan. "Your input is valued, Master Sergeant," he states without preamble. "Options for infiltration?" Sullivan outlines 3 potential approaches based on his reconnaissance and the maps obtained from the underground facility. Primary entrance is now compromised. They'll expect conventional assault through this point. Secondary access requires extended underwater navigation through partially flooded tunnels. Third option involves accessing ventilation systems from higher elevation, approximately 2 kilometers southeast of main facility. Javelin considers these options, clearly weighing risk factors against tactical advantages. Assessment of ventilation approach? Most technically challenging, requires specialized climbing equipment and confined space navigation, but offers highest probability of achieving surprise. Ventilation system observed during reconnaissance appears sufficient for K9 units and possibly smallest team members. The decision comes quickly, as Sullivan expected from an operator of Javelin's caliber. We proceed with ventilation approach. Advanced team continues surveillance at primary entrance, creates distraction if necessary. Main element divides, Alpha team for ventilation infiltration. Bravo maintains capability to assault through primary or secondary entrance depending on developing situation. Sullivan outlines his proposed role. Ranger and Scout can lead the ventilation approach, providing advanced reconnaissance and confirmation of viable route to target area. Javelin studies the dogs thoughtfully. Remote operation capabilities? Affirmative. Both trained for autonomous navigation with handler guidance through communication systems. Acceptable. You'll coordinate with Alpha team leader for insertion sequence. The operation accelerates into final preparation phase. While specialized teams prepare their equipment and review tactical approaches, Sullivan receives a concerning update from Director Reeves. "We've been researching local mining history as you requested," she reports, spreading several maps and documents across a makeshift table. "There's something odd. Official records show minimal mining activity in this specific region, but we found references in historical newspapers to a government-linked operation in the late 1950s that doesn't appear in any public records." Sullivan studies the materials with growing interest. Cold War era. What kind of operation? That's where it gets murky. The newspaper accounts are vague, typical for the period when national security was concerned. But local folklore filled in the gaps. Stories about special materials being extracted, unusual security measures, workers required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Uranium, Sullivan concludes, connecting the historical context with the geographic profile. This region has trace deposits. During the arms race, even marginal sources were explored. Reeves looks alarmed. "You think this current operation is connected to radioactive materials?" "Possibly, but not necessarily direct extraction. The existing tunnel system might have been repurposed." Sullivan's mind works through tactical implications. This could explain the facility's sophisticated ventilation and containment systems, potentially designed to manage environmental hazards. This new information is immediately incorporated into the operational planning. If the underground facility was originally designed for radioactive material handling, additional precautions might be necessary for the extraction team and especially for the children, who could have been exposed to harmful substances. As preparations continue, Sullivan takes a moment to check on his dogs. Ranger and Scout rest quietly but alertly, conserving energy for the coming operation. Despite hours of demanding work, both animals remain focused and responsive, a testament to their exceptional training and conditioning. "They're remarkable animals," observes a member of Alpha Team, a compact woman who moves with the fluid. Grace of someone extensively trained in confined space operations. "I worked with military K9s in Afghanistan. Nothing like these two." "They're the result of specialized breeding and training programs," Sullivan explains. "Selected for intelligence, physical capabilities and temperament, then trained using principles adapted from multiple disciplines: military tracking, search and rescue, disaster response, and cognitive problem solving." "You sound like quite the scientist for a Marine," she notes with mild surprise. "E-guidance through the communication system, directing the dogs based on their sensory input and the evolving map of the facility they're creating." After approximately 15 minutes of careful navigation, Ranger's camera shows something significant: a grated opening overlooking what appears to be the main production area, Sullivan observed during his initial reconnaissance. The dog positions himself to provide maximum visual coverage, allowing the team to observe operations below. The facility remains active despite the late hour. Personnel in protective equipment continue working with what appear to be specialized containers. Armed guards maintain positions at key access points, their weapons and posture suggesting professional training. Confirming active production facility, Alpha Leader notes, count 8 personnel in main chamber, 4 armed security visible, equipment consistent with chemical processing rather than radioactive materials. Sullivan studies the feed carefully, noting details that might not be immediately apparent to others. Look at the containment protocols. He indicates specific procedures being followed by the workers. Those are biological containment measures, not standard chemical handling. And the security personnel positioning suggests specific threat anticipation rather than routine protection. Assessment. They're expecting company, Sullivan concludes grimly. Either they detected our earlier reconnaissance or they're following established security protocols for high-value operations. Either way, they're prepared for intrusion. This complicates the tactical approach significantly. If the facility operators are on heightened alert, the element of surprise becomes even more crucial for successful extraction of the children. Proceeding to target location, Sullivan directs, guiding the dogs to continue through the ventilation system toward the area where the children are believed to be held. The dogs navigate several more junctions before Ranger alerts to human scent, indicating they're approaching the secured area identified in Sullivan's initial reconnaissance. Moving with increased caution, both dogs advance until reaching another grated opening, this one overlooking a corridor with a reinforced door guarded by 2 armed men. Probable containment area, Sullivan reports, studying the security measures, visible through the dogs' cameras. Electronic access control, armed personnel, likely additional measures not visible from this position. Scout continues past this position, following a branch of the ventilation system that appears to lead directly into the secured room. After several tense minutes, the dog reaches another grate, this one providing visual access to the interior of the containment area. The feed shows a stark room with minimal furnishings. 3 cots, basic sanitation facilities, and a small table with what appears to be food and water containers. Most importantly, it shows 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, corresponding to the descriptions of the missing Mitchell siblings. They appear physically unharmed, though clearly frightened and confused. Targets confirmed, Sullivan reports, relief evident in his voice despite his professional demeanor. All 3 children present and appear uninjured. Alpha Leader immediately relays this confirmation to the Operation Commander, requesting authorization to proceed with Extraction Plan Alpha 3. The response comes quickly. Authorization granted. Bravo team initiating diversionary action in 20 minutes. Proceed when ready, with the children's location confirmed and their condition assessed as stable. The extraction plan accelerates into its final phase. Alpha Team will infiltrate through the ventilation system, breach the containment room, secure the children, and extract back through the ventilation route if possible, or fight through to one of the identified emergency exits if necessary. Simultaneously, Bravo Team will create a calculated distraction at the main entrance, drawing security personnel away from the children's location without triggering full lockdown protocols that might endanger the extraction. As Alpha Team prepares for final approach, Sullivan notices something concerning in Scout's video feed. The youngest boy, Tyler, appears to be examining something on his arm, a small bracelet-like device that wasn't mentioned in any of the missing persons information. Hold, Sullivan commands suddenly. Unknown device on youngest child's wrist. Possible tracking or monitoring system. Alpha leader immediately understands the implications. If that's active monitoring, removing the children will trigger immediate alert. Sullivan studies the device through the enhanced video feed, noting its construction and apparent function. Appears to be biometric monitor, likely tracking vital signs. Removing it incorrectly could trigger alarm or potentially harm the child. Options? Sullivan considers the tactical problem, drawing on his experience with similar security measures encountered during his military service. We need to maintain the biometric signature while removing the children. Specialized equipment required. The team's technical specialist already has a solution. Signal cloning device could maintain the biometric pattern while we remove the actual monitor. Need close proximity to establish connection. This adds another layer of complexity to an already challenging operation. The team will need to enter the containment room, establish connection with the monitoring device, clone its signal pattern, and only then can they safely remove the children without triggering alarms. Time estimate. For signal cloning, Alpha Leader asks, 3 to 5 minutes per device, assuming standard encryption. The specialist responds. If all 3 children are monitored, total process could take up to 15 minutes. Too long, Sullivan assesses. Security rotations observed earlier suggest guard changes every 30 minutes. We need to complete extraction within that window. The team quickly adapts their approach, incorporating Sullivan's tactical assessment. They will use the dogs to establish initial reconnaissance inside the containment room, confirming whether all 3 children have monitoring devices and assessing any additional security measures not visible from outside. Sullivan prepares Ranger and Scout for their new task, providing specific instructions through their communication systems. The smallest member of Alpha Team, a woman selected for specialized infiltration roles, will follow through the ventilation system to the containment room grate, carrying the signal cloning equipment. Ranger Scout, detail search. Sullivan, commands, find trackers. Both dogs understand the instruction, having been trained to identify and alert to electronic devices through specialized scent recognition. They move into position at the ventilation grate overlooking the containment room, studying the children below with focused attention. After several minutes of observation, Ranger provides the specific alert pattern indicating electronic device. Detection on all 3 children, not just the youngest, as initially observed. The older children's monitoring devices appear to be concealed beneath their clothing, explaining why they weren't immediately visible. All 3 children monitored, Sullivan reports. Devices appear to be on wrists or ankles, consistent with standard biometric monitoring points. This information necessitates further adjustment to the extraction plan. With 3 devices to clone simultaneously, the technical approach becomes significantly more challenging. We have multi-channel cloning capability, the specialist confirms after conferring with team members. But the process becomes more complex with 3 separate signals to maintain. Risk of detection increases substantially. Alpha Leader makes the tactical decision. Proceed with modified extraction. Technical specialist and 2 team members enter containment room through ventilation. Establish signal cloning simultaneously for all 3 children. Remainder of team prepares for direct intervention if compromised. As the infiltration team makes final preparations, Sullivan receives an urgent communication from the operation commander. Surveillance team reports increased activity at main entrance. Vehicle approaching facility. Estimated arrival 3 minutes. This new development threatens to disrupt carefully coordinated timing. If the arriving vehicle contains additional security personnel or higher-level operators, the entire dynamic of the facility could change. Maintain operation timeline, comes the decisive command. Bravo team will intercept vehicle before it reaches the facility. Alpha team continues as planned. Sullivan returns his focus to the infiltration team, now entering the ventilation system, following the path his dogs established. The technical specialist leads, carrying equipment specifically designed for covert signal interception and replication. 2 additional team members follow, each responsible for securing one child during the extraction. Ranger and Scout remain in position, continuing to provide real-time surveillance of the containment room and surrounding corridors. Through their specialized camera systems, Sullivan monitors guard movements and potential threats, ready to alert the infiltration team to any changes. The next 20 minutes unfold with nerve-wracking precision. The infiltration team successfully reaches the ventilation grate overlooking the containment room, carefully removes it without alerting the children, and establishes visual confirmation of the monitoring devices. All 3 children wear similar bracelet-like monitors on their left wrists, each emitting subtle indicator lights suggesting active transmission. Using specialized equipment lowered on thin cables, the technical specialist begins the delicate process of establishing connection with the monitoring devices without removing them from the children. The process requires extraordinary patience and precision. Any sudden movement could alert the children to their presence or disrupt the sensitive electronic interface. Meanwhile, Bravo team reports successful interception of the approaching vehicle without alerting the facility. 2 personnel contained, document secured, vehicle immobilized at safe distance. This small victory provides a momentary advantage, but everyone involved understands the operation remains balanced on a knife's edge. The children's lives depend on maintaining perfect coordination between multiple teams operating in extraordinarily challenging conditions. After what seems like an eternity, the technical specialist reports success. Signal lock established on all 3 devices, monitoring patterns recorded and replicated, ready for extraction. Alpha leader gives the command Sullivan has been waiting for: execute extraction. All teams stand by for rapid response. The infiltration team moves with practiced efficiency, lowering themselves into the containment room. The children's initial alarm quickly transforms to relief when the team identifies themselves as rescuers. Using child-appropriate language and reassuring techniques, they quickly explain the situation and prepare the children for extraction. "We need to be very quiet," one team member instructs the children. "We're going to help you climb up into this air duct and crawl through it to get outside. Your mom and dad sent us to find you." The mention of their parents has a visible calming effect on the children. The youngest boy, Tyler, whispers a question that sends a chill through everyone monitoring the operation. "Did you find Uncle Travis too? They said they would hurt him if we tried to leave." This new information, that the children were directly threatened regarding escape attempts, adds another layer of complexity to an already tense situation. If the facility operators have established specific protocols for attempted escapes, the window for successful extraction could be even narrower than anticipated. "We're helping your uncle too," the team member assures him, maintaining the delicate balance between truth and necessary operational security. "But right now, we need to get you 3 to safety." As the team carefully removes and replaces the monitoring devices with signal replicators, Sullivan alerts to a concerning development captured by Ranger's surveillance position. Guard rotation approaching containment area. Estimated arrival 90 seconds. The extraction timeline compresses drastically. The infiltration team abandons the careful, methodical approach planned originally, shifting to rapid evacuation. The oldest child, Jason, is already being guided into the ventilation shaft. His sister Emma follows, with team members providing reassurance and physical assistance through the confined space. As they prepare to lift the youngest child, Tyler, into the shaft, the signal from one of the replicator devices fluctuates. Losing signal integrity on device 3. the technical specialist reports urgently, attempting to stabilize. Sullivan watches through Scout's camera as guard footsteps become audible in the corridor outside the containment room. The timing has become critical. If the guard checks the room before the extraction team completes their withdrawal, the entire operation could be compromised. 30 seconds to guard visual, Sullivan warns. Bravo team, initiate distraction protocol now. Responding immediately, Bravo team executes their pre-planned diversionary action at the facility's main entrance. A carefully calculated security probe designed to draw attention and resources without triggering full lockdown protocols. Within moments, alarms sound throughout the facility. Through Ranger's surveillance position, Sullivan observes the guards outside the containment room, receiving communications, then quickly moving toward the main entrance, exactly as intended. Corridor clear, Sullivan confirms. Complete extraction. Now, with the youngest child safely in the ventilation shaft and the infiltration team following behind, the most dangerous phase of the operation is nearly complete. The children are guided through the ventilation system by team members, with Ranger and Scout leading the way back toward the exit point. The journey through the confined space is challenging, especially for the frightened children. But the team maintains calm efficiency, providing constant reassurance and assistance. After 20 minutes of careful movement, they reach the external access point where the remainder of Alpha Team waits to secure them. As the children emerge into the cool night air, medical personnel immediately assess their condition while security teams establish a protective perimeter. The Mitchell siblings, though frightened and confused, appear physically unharmed. A remarkable outcome, given the circumstances of their captivity. Sullivan watches as the youngest boy, Tyler, looks up at the star-filled sky with an expression of profound relief. Despite everything these children have endured, their resilience shines through, a reminder of why missions like this matter, regardless of personal cost. While the children receive preliminary medical care, Alpha Leader approaches Sullivan with an update. Extraction complete. All 3 targets secured. Proceeding with emergency evacuation to secure location. The facility? Operation Commander has authorized full containment protocol, specialized units moving in now to secure personnel and materials. Evidence collection teams following. Sullivan nods, understanding what isn't being explicitly stated. The underground facility and everyone in it will be contained, its operations documented and dismantled, with the full authority of whatever agency commands this specialized team. Director Reeves approaches, her expression reflecting mixed emotions. Relief at the children's recovery, concern about what they've uncovered, and perhaps a new respect for the capabilities Sullivan brought to the operation. The children are asking for their uncle, she informs him. They don't know yet, Sullivan realizes, about his involvement. No, the team didn't tell them. That conversation needs to happen in a controlled environment with proper support. Sullivan agrees. The Mitchell siblings have experienced enough trauma without learning of their uncle's betrayal in the chaos of an emergency extraction. What about the uncle's wife? Was she actually being held, or was that part of his cover story? Still being verified, Reeves responds. Initial intelligence suggests there may be truth to his claim, but the details are unclear. Either way, this goes far beyond a simple missing persons case. Looking toward the secured perimeter where the children are being prepared for transport, Sullivan feels the weight of questions still unanswered. Why target these specific children? What connection does their parents' military work have to the underground facility? And perhaps most concerningly, how extensive is the network that orchestrated such a sophisticated operation? As if reading his thoughts, Reeves asks, "Do you think this is over? With the facility contained?" Sullivan watches as Ranger and Scout rejoin him, their mission completed, but their alertness undiminished. "No," he answers truthfully. "This was one piece of something much larger, and I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface. In the distance, the faint glow of dawn begins to lighten the eastern sky. A new day approaches, bringing with it the promise of answers, and very likely, even more disturbing questions about what. 3 days after the rescue operation, Sullivan sits on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun rise over the Cascade Mountains. Ranger and Scout rest at his feet, their extraordinary work acknowledged only by the specialized team that disappeared as mysteriously as they had arrived. No press conferences, no public statements, just 3 children safely returned to protective custody, while multiple federal agencies untangle the web of conspiracy surrounding their abduction. His satellite phone rings, a secure connection. Few possess. Sullivan. His voice remains neutral despite recognizing the caller ID. Thought you'd want an update, Javelin's clipped tone conveys. Facility contained 23 personnel in custody. Material secured. Biological agents. Designed for targeted deployment in urban water systems. Appears to be part of larger operation. Inside his cabin, on a desk rarely used, lies a formal letter delivered by courier that morning. Official letterhead, presidential seal, and an opening line that cuts through bureaucratic language with stark clarity. Your country requires your unique capabilities in service of an ongoing threat to national security. Sullivan hasn't signed it yet, but he will. Because some skills come with responsibilities that can never truly be put aside. Because sometimes the most valuable weapon against darkness is specialized knowledge honed through years of painful experience. Because 3 children are alive today due to his decision to answer one desperate phone call. As the sun climbs higher, Sullivan makes another call. To Dr. Ana Martinez at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. That cabin-checking favor might need to be extended, he tells her when she answers. I've been called back to service. There's a moment of silence before she responds. Always suspected you weren't just some retired Marine training dogs for fun. Anything you can tell me about what's happening? Nothing that wouldn't sound like conspiracy theories, he answers honestly. But those missing children were just the beginning of something bigger, and they need you to find the rest, she concludes with remarkable insight. The mysterious hermit with the extraordinary dogs suddenly makes more sense. Your cabin will be fine, Lucas. Just try to come back in one piece. Sullivan allows himself a rare smile. The dogs won't let me do otherwise. By nightfall, Sullivan, Ranger and Scout are aboard a military transport flight, heading toward the first of many operations that will test the limits of their specialized capabilities. The mountains fade behind them as they fly eastward, carrying with them the weight of knowledge few could bear and skills even fewer possess. What began as a desperate plea from a search and rescue team transformed into the exposure of a threat reaching into the highest levels of power. And one retired Marine with 2 remarkable dogs stands as a unique weapon against enemies hidden in plain sight, moving undetected beneath the surface of everyday life. The next time a K9 team pleads for assistance, it won't be civilian search and rescue reaching out, but specialized units assembled specifically to counter this emerging threat. And Sullivan will answer, because some skills can't remain buried when lives hang in the balance. Because some retirements must be postponed when the alternative means surrendering to shadows that thrive in darkness. As for the Mitchell children, they sleep soundly tonight under the watchful protection of people who understand the true value of specialized knowledge and the extraordinary capabilities of those who walk the knife's edge between the world as most know it and the reality few could comprehend.